my hair's been getting a little longer. I don't want to brag, but apparently I now have this style of hair that's commonly referred to as a man bun. You're familiar with this, Ty?
I may have heard of it.
It's become a pretty big part of the zeitgeist, in recent years. Probably the past 10 years or so, right? I wonder when the first iteration of the term
I'd say
came
10
about.
years or less, probably.
So now I have, quote unquote, a man bun, I guess. Although it's, I don't know, I don't have enough hair to be a bun. It just kind of tie it up so it doesn't fall on my fucking eyes. But like, it's really gotten me thinking because I also listen to podcasts where they have to promote stuff. And there's also a company called Manscaped. Have you heard of them?
I have.
So yeah, Manscaped. So that way, guys can trim their nether regions. That's it. I guess like men do. I don't know.
Well, not to get into too much detail, but you can have some accidents while you're trimming down there, and they specifically make tools that will prevent that from happening.
Oh, okay. So promoted by Manscaped. Use the code PolitiPop to get 10% off your first. Imagine. Honestly, if they hear this and they're like, fuck it.
We'll take it. I'll talk about Manscaped every day.
Cash. Oh, that's good. Do you use Manscaped or no?
It's been in my my zeitgeist for a while, but I haven't actually pulled the trigger on purchasing it.
I mean, I just hear about it because I'm a huge podcast listener.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that's where I first heard about it, and that got me thinking. So I checked out their website, and I was like, "Wow, this is really fucking expensive, but it sounds really good." So.
Yeah, I've had accidents. I'll say it. Using clippers that are meant for my scalp and accidentally, nicking down there. It's not a fun time. I'll say that. But also, there's another company called Man Bands. Do you know what Man Bands are?
They're bands for your man bun?
They're actually wedding rings for men.
Okay.
And there's also, there was one more. I think there's like Man Soap or something like that. I don't know if it's called Man Soap, but like you see all these advertisements, especially like on YouTube and stuff. And it's just, I don't know, like I've really started to notice just how insecure men are in their masculinity, that it's a whole marketing strategy to be like, are you marrying your wife like a pussy? How about you get a real ring? Like, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? Or are you tying up your hair? It's a man bun. Like, it's just a bun. Like, hair doesn't have a gender.
They're trying to make guys feel more comfortable about it, because I remember about 4 years ago, a couple of people at my job started wearing their hair like that. And my store manager at the time, who's like definitely like an old school, macho man, and he was not like. He was not.
Macho man, Randy Savage coming back to the podcast.
He just walk around talking like that. It was really fucking annoying. We're trying to work here, man. No, but he was like really like weird about it. He'd always make fun of them. He wouldn't like. If you interviewed someone with that hair, he'd be like, "Oh, you're not gonna bring them on board, right?" Like he would literally like be that extra about it. And
Wow.
I think he was just really insecure, like, and he didn't have a whole lot of hair. So I'm like, yeah, you can't pull this shit off, bro. So that's why you're pissed.
He's got some hair envy.
Yeah, which I had when you were talking about your man bun.
I was about to ask, is that a thing?
I felt a little triggered, not gonna lie.
Wow.
But I will say my hair has been growing a little bit more thanks to some natural hair care products. But unfortunately, it really grows on the sides and on the back, not on the top.
What the fuck? That's like the main place where men always keep their hair when they're balding. That doesn't help anyone.
I know. It's like just growing like extra now. I'm like, holy shit. One day I'm going to be able to just topple it over the top and it'll be fine. So.
Hey, Jean-Luc Picard had that dude, and he was one of the most badass motherfuckers of all time.
You're right.
So,
but yeah, thinking about it, like there's this vegan market that I know you're also familiar with that I frequent pretty often, and there was a barbershop next door to it, and it was called like the Gentleman's Barbershop or something along those lines, and
yes.
They had like this police like signage in the window, and the vegan store had like Black Lives Matter signage in the window. So I'm pretty...
Which I noticed last time I went there. I was like, oh, that's the dynamic.
Yeah, so I'm pretty cool with the owner. So, like, I was just, like, shoot the shit with him. And, like, I was in there one day, and I said to him, so what's the deal with, like, the place next door? Like, did they put that sign up, like, in like, retaliation because you put a Black Lives Matter sign up? And he was pretty much like, yeah. He's like, they also only allow men to get their hair cut there. You cannot go in there if you're a woman. So he actually had called the town on them because he said that you can't, prevent an entire gender of people to shop at your building. You know what I mean? He's like, so I don't understand how they got away with that. And the crazy part is it was owned by a woman.
No.
Yeah, how nuts is that?
Really?
But they actually wound up closing down not that long ago. So they were only open for maybe a year, if that. But
just a year?
I think so. They weren't there very long.
Oh, okay. All right, because I part of me felt a little bad because I was going to be like, it sucks to see a small business go down during a pandemic. And, like the way their shop was set up, they did the old-fashioned thing on purpose. Like, I thought it was like a staple of the community. When I saw it, I was like, man, people must have been going here for years getting their hair cut.
No, it was pretty new.
But
yeah, they were just like, you have to be a man to get your hair cut here. Like, how dare you? And like, I don't think a lot of women frequent barbershops, but I know for a fact that mine does not say you can't come in if you're a woman. I've been going to the same barbershop since I was 13. So I've been going there a long time, and I have seen like maybe a handful of women get their hair cut there. They actually have a few female barbers as well. So I can't even imagine them being like, you're a woman, you can't come in here, and that's like what this place was all about. I just think it's pretty wild.
I think the reason was because they just don't know how to cut women's hair, and they were like so insecure about it, and they were like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna keep them out of here. Yeah. We're like, no women allowed.
For their protection, because we're gonna fuck their hair up. It actually was trying to save them.
I mean, honestly, like it really is. Like, I think obviously you should allow anybody into your place of business. If you're cutting hair there, yeah, sure. But like, if a woman came into my barbershop with like, long luscious locks, I would be like, all right, like, you're taking your hair into your own hands here by coming in here. But I'm not gonna tell you not to have a seat in one of our chairs. But also, obviously, not every woman has that same hairstyle. Like, not every woman wants to keep her hair long. Maybe she keeps it short, or like, shorn to the sides of her head or whatever. Like, so there's definitely like styles. And let's say it's an individual. How do I put it? An individual, identified female at birth, or assigned female at birth, who, may still kind of look that way, but they wear their hair a different way and, want to get it done in a barbershop. Like, because it could be a trans man, or it could be somebody like who's just in between or just likes their hair a certain way. But yeah, you got a point. But yeah, just like, man, I guess there's a bunch of memes online where like, I'm not one of those guys who will, who's going to cry in front of his friends. And then someone else would like retweet it and he'd be like, fellas, is it gay to feel? Like literally like every single thing that we attribute. It's even a purse is called a man purse, right? Like, yeah. You can't gender, like, I don't put on my man shoes, I put on my sneakers.
Whoa,
I don't put
you
on my
don't?
man shirt. Oh, I know you have man shoes, but
Yeah.
but I personally, which by the way, I know they're novelty shoes. Tyler doesn't wear them everywhere, but they're huge slippers that are in the shape of penises.
That's right.
Yes.
Yep.
Actually, that's a little transphobic too. Damn. But yeah, I guess I'm still blown away by the fact that there's a marketing technique. I mean, all marketing really does capitalize on the insecurities of the consumer. But this, like, especially, like, are you shaving your pubes? Which, by the way, how long ago would that have been considered not manly? And it's like, all right, well, now you can shave your pubes, but only if you do it with this, because you're a man. Or like, all right, you're gonna wear jewelry, but only this guy, the man. There's no difference between a man band and another wedding band that I would get.
Right,
like,
right. I think Manscaped, I kind of get. I think it's easy to remember. You kind of get the gist of what they're going for immediately. But like, yeah, a wedding band seems a bit much.
All right, now that we got that out of the way, Ty, do you guess how many new reviews there are?
Less than 5.
That is a good guess.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, everybody, 0. That's right. But if you want to have your reviews right at the top of the show, all you need to do is go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star. I mean, I'm only going to read them from Apple Podcasts, so go there specifically. Listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Review us on Apple, because that's the one that counts. Steve Jobs' ghost has me by the balls. But if you want to have your review right at the top of the show, all you need to do is go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, regardless of what you think of us. Leave us a 5-star review, and then shit on us in the comments.
That's right. I only do this for the reviews, so please.
I'm sorry, because you have not been sustained sustained at all this past year.
I know. I've
You've had a
ate it
couple
few
of
times.
meals. But with that, everybody, we're going to get into the episode. You ready to bring in the theme song, Ty?
Oh, let's bring it on in.
Welcome back to the PolitiPop podcast, the podcast where we read between the lines of your MCU streaming Disney Plus shows that are part of pop culture media and discuss the these are more social themes, but also social and political themes within. I am your co-host, Mike Booch, aka the Soy Boy Pseudo-Intellectual, and in my second seat, as always, is my co-host, Ty.
Hello.
Ty, quick question for you. What does the theme song sound like?
Yeah, I have a couple of
In your mind.
guesses.
What's this week's guess?
It's like an old school rock. It's like rock and roll.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, ballad. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that right?
Are there any lyrics to this ballad?
No. It's all instrumental.
No? Not like PolitiPop podcast.
No, but I know a guy that wants to do that.
Mike's declining mental health. All right, cool.
I'm gonna listen to it one day. All right, don't.
One
get
day
off my
he
case.
will, folks. That was this week's installment of Has Ty listened to the theme song, and what does he think it sounds like if he hasn't? A very long name for a segment. But folks, today we are reviewing WandaVision.
Yeah, the first Marvel TV show on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Wow.
On Disney Plus, yeah. I was like, it's not Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I'm not sure if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is canon. There's a whole thing.
We don't talk about Agents of
yeah.
S.H.I.E.L.D., okay?
Yeah, first, it's no Agent Carter, but I'm not sure if Agent Carter's canon. So.
It is, but it was canceled.
Oh, okay. It's no Inhumans. I'm not sure if Inhumans is canon.
That I don't know.
Oh, you don't? Okay. It's no Runaways. I'm not sure if Runaways is canon. I don't think
not.
Runaways is canon, right? It's not MCU.
Cloak and Dagger.
Oh, it's no Cloak and Dagger. I'm not sure if Cloak and Dagger's canon.
That I have no idea either.
But folks, we have a very special guest for you today. You heard her first on our Psychology of Batman episode, which I know is weird to say because almost every episode since then has been about the psychology of Batman in one way or another. But you've also seen her artwork on almost every episode of this podcast. She was the one who designed the PolitiPop logo, graciously allowed me to use it.
Yeah.
Doesn't get on my ass when I forget to mention her at the end of the episodes.
That's right.
She has a background in psych. She is an incredible cat mom, and she is going to be lending us her brain, and we'll have a little what's the word? Disclaimer, a little bit after we introduce her before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, or the tofu and potatoes of the episode. And without further ado, folks, please put your hands together wherever you are, unless you're driving, for Antonia Chava. Thanks for coming back to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I shouldn't have asked how are you. I'm sorry. It's just nobody should ever, after 2020, nobody should ever ask how are you or how things are. I should just say
It's a
great
trap.
to have you.
Well, I'm going to do the American thing. I'm going to say good, thank you, and not actually explain everything.
That is perfect. That is
Versus
perfect.
the European response would be everything that's happened to me in the last year.
Which would be a whole different podcast,
Yes.
as I tend to overshare as well. But it's awesome to have you back on here, and the reason I'm having you on here specifically is you are a woman, which means you undoubtedly have trauma in your past, and also you do have an insight into psych. But that being said, I want to let everybody listening at home know that we are not professionals. That if you are in a state of emotional or mental crisis and you need help, please do look for professional help. Don't count on what we are saying. I was in a therapy session less than an hour ago. So I'm still working on me. I'm not going to tell you how to handle your life. But with that being said, we usually approach this stuff from more of an entertainment perspective. Anything we do say, we either provide sources for, or I will always say, I don't know. look it up yourself. Like, if I'm not 100% certain on something, I'll let you know about it. And that's probably why we don't have a huge listener base. But
oh, and one thing I do want to add to the disclaimer is also, and I've seen this on YouTube videos, and I think it's useful and a very good idea, that sometimes just certain topics alone are too hard for people to listen to. So if they do feel triggered by listening to anything about trauma, feel free to not listen. I mean, I know you want people to listen, but got to give the warning.
Not if it's going to do anything bad to them.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you might be triggered by any talks of trauma, because we will be bringing up trauma, and I think that should be brought up right away, that if it's going to be, if it's going to be triggering, don't listen to this one.
Yeah. Thank you so much for reminding me. So this is an official content warning as well. There will be talk of, I'm going to talk about my own personal shit a little bit. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about grief. We're going to talk about death. There may even be, talk of suicidal thoughts. So, I'm just letting everybody know ahead of time that, if you're dealing with this stuff, this podcast ain't worth it. Wait until you're a little bit better. Come back and listen. We'll still be here. Okay. So we are going into WandaVision today. Now, Antonia, you out of the three of us are probably, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, probably the most casual fan. This is coming from the guy who, I know a lot more about the DC comics, and even then it's more specifically Batman. Marvel comics I've read, but, I don't have like the deep knowledge that a lot of other people do. Ty is a lot more than I do, especially when it comes to Marvel. But you are the one who is kind of coming at this from the outside. So before you started this show, what did you know about like the Marvel Cinematic Universe? What drew you to this show in the first place?
Well, one, I didn't know too much about the Marvel Universe, and related, I didn't know much about DC. Like there were blurred lines where I wasn't sure which one was which. That's how little I know.
A lot of people still don't. So you're good.
Though I am proud of myself. I'm starting to figure it out, and I have to say streaming services have been helping. HBO Max has DC, I believe, and Disney Plus has Marvel, so I'm starting to learn who's who. But that's
brought to you by Disney Plus and HBO Max. No, I'm kidding. We were talking about products beforehand too. Before you came on, trying to just get some of that sweet ad money, get that revenue in if we can. But what drew you to WandaVision specifically?
So my introduction to in figuring out more about the two different worlds really came just from my own interest of WandaVision, which the trailers that I saw, whether it was, I don't remember where I initially saw trailers. It might have been YouTube, or I heard someone talking about it, so I watched a trailer. I don't remember how I came to see the trailer, but I just remember going, ooh, there's just something about that, even in the trailer, they did so well, just like the retro TV thing. And I just thought it was, I don't know, looked kitschy. Like, I don't know if that's the right word, but it just piqued my interest.
That's pretty, so, I mean, and I'm sure you're not the only one of those fans who came in. Now, did you do any research? Like, did you watch any Marvel movies before WandaVision started, or you just kind of went into it, without any prior knowledge?
I've seen some Marvel, but I didn't see anything prior. Like, I don't remember what I've seen in the past, to be honest with you. It was kind of just random. Like, I'm never against watching any of those movies. It was just not anything I ever sought out usually. Probably just because I wasn't introduced to any of it when I was younger, so I just didn't really have that drive to, explore it. Anyway, I had no idea who Wanda Maximoff was. I had no idea who Vision was. I was coming into this watching it for what it was. And I mean, I knew well enough just from like people talking about it before it even aired that, these are Marvel characters. So like, I did have an idea that these weren't going to be like average people.
They are an unusual couple.
They are.
Ty, what did you think going into this show?
Like, what did I expect of it, or?
Yeah. What were you expecting? Because I didn't actually watch any of the trailers. I wanted to go in knowing almost nothing except for what I've seen in the movies.
I feel like I say this all the time, but I kind of got almost exactly what I expected. I saw the trailers. I've read.
He goes, I expected shit, and I got shit.
I read Vision by Tom King. I've read House of M. So like I've read like all the comics that I knew were going to inspire it. And I guess I didn't expect maybe the sitcoms that they were spoofing to like be so direct, like you could definitely tell like Modern Family was in there, or, the Dick Van Dyke Show. I just thought it would be more broad, but there definitely was a lot more, specific references than I was expecting in that regard. But story-wise, I got almost pretty much exactly what I thought I would get. In fact, I actually might have gotten a little less than I was hoping for. I think Marvel's kind of spoiled us a little bit. And I was expecting some big like cameo or, some big like setup for the next one, specifically X-Men related. I really thought we were going to get some X-Men related stuff here. And
a lot of people did.
And we didn't. And that, I won't lie, that kind of disappointed me and soured the ending a little bit for me. But overall, it was kind of what I thought it would be. How about you?
Well, this isn't about me, you guys, but since you asked. I had heard the title WandaVision, and I heard them talk about it on like Kevin Smith's podcast, Fat Man Beyond, brought to you by Fat Man Beyond, PolitiPop. No, I'm kidding. But I'd heard them say like, oh, it's gonna be like Wanda and Vision living through like sitcoms and stuff like that.
Right.
And obviously there are a lot of questions because spoilers for the entire MCU, folks. Vision's dead. He died in Infinity War. And if you are going into this show not knowing anything about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, all I will suggest to you, I won't suggest you read anything. I won't suggest you sit through a couple hours of a movie. Go to Disney Plus, look up Marvel Legends, and look at the 7-minute featurette they have on Wanda. Because it takes the 20 minutes of combined screen time that she's had between all of these movies and puts it into this amazing flashback. Like, this is who she is, and the editing is great. The music's awesome. I was like, yo, I think I love Wanda Maximoff as a character. I had no idea. I was like, because she was always in the background in these other movies, but we do...
not in Age of Ultron.
I mean, yeah, but... I mean, she was a big... I mean, obviously, that was her introduction, but, I don't know. You had Captain America, Tony Stark. They were setting up Civil War. They were setting up Black Panther. She happened to be one of the bad guys. But, I mean, you're right. She was more in the forefront because I've watched it more recently. And I've appreciated it a lot more recently, too, after watching WandaVision. But I personally think that it was just kind of like, she... Honestly, and I'm not sure if this is on purpose or not, she just came in as a weapon, right? She came in when Strucker needed to use her. She came in when Ultron needed to use her. She came in when the Avengers needed to use her back against Ultron. She came in when Cap needed to use her against Tony. Her entire life, she has been a weapon.
Yeah, I mean, Civil War kind of begins, with her accidentally killing a bunch of civilians, right? And I think that
with her doing her fucking best.
Yeah, and like, so there was some really good character stuff there, but I do agree she's always kind of been a weapon. She's one of the most powerful beings they've kind of set up in the MCU, and that's kind of been her purpose. We haven't really gotten to see the more tender moments, of her life and what she wants out of it.
Yeah. Now, before we go into like the thick of it, how about you just give him the plot, Ty?
WandaVision blends a style of classic sitcoms with the MCU, in which Wanda Maximoff and Vision, two superpowered beings living their ideal suburban lives, begin to suspect that everything is not as it seems.
Now, one thing I want to bring up is the creative team behind this. I am aware that there were a lot more women in the writers' room, and that I feel that made a huge impact on the story. Antonia, do you feel that like this is a story that like, I don't want to say only a woman could tell, but like I think the character of Wanda is written from a much different way than the character of, let's say, Steve Rogers. As a woman who's been through similar experiences, I remember the time you got powers from Hydra and joined the Avengers. Or maybe you haven't had similar experiences, but
traumatic experiences in general.
Yeah. Do you feel that that makes a difference as to the authenticity of a character like this?
I think it definitely does. And I think I read that half the writers were female. I don't know if it was most or half. And
that's okay, I guess.
I was really Well, and I think the showrunner and what the director was the director female too.
I know Jack Shackman.
Matt Shackman
is a man. Matt Shackman.
Yeah.
Well, then why the? Sorry, on IMDb it's, and I thought it was Matt too. It says, oh, it said Jack Schaefer. My bad. Yeah, so Matt Shackman. I'm not even gonna edit that out.
Good.
Guys, we don't give a fuck.
But I thought it was
myself
interesting
before
how
the
many
podcast.
women there were, and I did think it was important because there, and this is no offense to men, but you know,
If any men take offense, then fuck them.
well,
Sorry.
no, I mean,
we have enough stuff.
in a very general hetero discussion sense of society and how boys are raised to, you know, not show their feelings and not, you know, hold it in and tough it out and whatever else you want to, you know, I'm sure there's a whole list of things that you'd be better at explaining than me. But
Yeah, we went through a lot of them in the Lord of the Rings episode, featuring now excommunicated Frankie. So,
interesting.
yes, yeah.
But then women are taught to, you know, show their feelings, you know, process things, express them. And yes, when you get into cases of trauma, which we'll talk about, like there's suppression of things. But I think there is a nuance and an understanding from a female writer that you wouldn't necessarily get if it was a male writing it. And I think that made a difference.
Yeah, because there's a lot of internet chatter, across social media and stuff. Speaking of internet, I just want to digress for 5 seconds here. Folks, if you were really into this and you can't get enough, go to the New Rockstars YouTube channel. I went through all their videos, every week, listening to their theories, which some of them turned out to be true, some of them weren't. But, it's a fun ride. And especially for somebody who's been home for the past year, it just helps to, kind of have other people talking about the same stuff that, that you're talking about. So social media, a lot of people have been saying that Wanda is a villain or Wanda is the villain. What are your takes on that? Whichever one of you wants to go first.
I mean, I'll go first if you don't mind, just as somebody who hasn't seen anything else about her. If we're sticking strictly to WandaVision, talking about Wanda, I don't necessarily, now obviously spoilers are allowed because it's kind of hard to talk about it without giving things away.
Oh shit, we forgot to throw that in. Everybody, spoiler warning in full effect right now, folks.
It's been in effect. Oh god.
You don't want to hear anything. I mean, I did say spoilers for Infinity War, but if you don't want anything else,
I'll have a little trouble saying what I want to say if I have to worry about spoiler alerts, or spoiling things. But I mean, okay, so one could see her as a villain because she had this entire town, not intentionally as prisoners, which we'll get into, but in the end, they were trapped and controlled. So that's not okay. So you could see her as a villain that way, but if you look at the rest of it and then you understand why it happened, I mean, it still happened. She still did it. But it was definitely it wasn't intentional. So I have trouble. Oh no, that's fine. So I have trouble seeing her purely as a villain. I don't think she did the right thing, but it also wasn't intentional and she did the right thing in the end. So it's a hard one for me.
Do I think she's evil? I think she's evil? No, absolutely not. But could you argue she's the villain of the series? I think so, because, they kind of make it like Agnes was behind it all along. But what did she really do? She was just kind of hanging out, trying to figure out how to get Wanda's powers. There comes a point, I think it's the halfway point of the series, where Wanda begins to realize, what's happened in this town. She leaves kind of the bubble of her home and confronts Sword and threatens them, right? And, she's intentionally now keeping the people in this town under her control. And she's doing it out of love and out of grief. And, I think you do have to take that into account. But, at the same time, she is forcing people against their will. And, Vision actually confronts her about this a few times. And she just keeps, changing the story and trying to make sure that he's not aware of it happening. So, I definitely think you could argue she is the villain of this series, but, again, not necessarily evil. She's not in full control of her powers, especially in the first half. And, in the very end, she does decide to free everyone, at the detriment of her own family, and let them go back to their lives. But there was a point where, I don't know if she was going to make that decision. And if a lot of outside influences hadn't interfered, she may have never broken out of that cycle and kind of kept them here, out of a selfishness that she wanted to keep Vision, alive and have her kids with her.
Yeah, I think that this series really opens up room for a nuanced conversation. I haven't seen any nuanced conversations, but I think it opens up room for one. Because there's that old saying, hurt people hurt people. You know what I mean? If we don't figure out our own shit, then eventually we'll traumatize others, whether it's intentionally or not. I couldn't help but think of one of the people that former President Trump didn't pardon. There was a woman who had done something terrible, and I'm not going to say it on the podcast, but she did something really terrible to another woman, and ended up taking her life as a result of it. And she was put on death row for it. And she had written a letter to Trump to say, "Please pardon me. Here's my history," and her history was heartbreaking is an understatement. The terrible amount of abuse and trauma that she suffered as a child that changed who she was. And, we discussed it last time, and, and my cousin Moni was also, saying that, like, trauma changes you. We have to survive. So if something bad happens to us, we mentally prepare and find another way around it. That's how we work. We adapt to things. And Wanda made me think of this because when you really look at it, from 8 years old or whenever she had to suffer through a civil war in Sokovia, she has been going through trauma. She lost her parents, which I can tell you even as a grown adult is a tough thing to go through. She ended up having to volunteer, and she was put into terrible experiments with Hydra. She was quote unquote radicalized. Tyler and I will probably have some opinions on that later. When we get to director Hayward of S.W.O.R.D. But pretty much her entire life, she has been used as a weapon. Ultron manipulated her. Tony manipulated her. And then even after the whole thing with Thanos, after Endgame, she just wanted to bury her husband. That was it. She wanted to bury the man she loved, and Hayward intentionally pushed her.
Yeah.
He pushed her to see if she would bring Vision back online. And I think it was very intentional because they're S.W.O.R.D. They're not going to tear apart a weapon that expensive. They did it on purpose, I think. They had him strewn all, and also as a callback to the comic books, but they had him strewn all about there. They were, chopping him up, hacking away at him and stuff. And I, that she was pushed there. Like it's so often that we see what people do and not what led to it. And society as a whole always judges certain groups of people differently.
Right.
We wouldn't be the PolitiPop podcast if we didn't bring up the fact that, anytime, a white cop kills an unarmed black man, there's always, oh, well, you don't know what happened before that. You don't know what led up to it. You don't know what was going through the cop's head. You don't know this, blah, 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 blah. But then as soon as a black person does something wrong, they're a waste of space. They're a waste of energy. They're a detriment to society. Put them away for life. So Wanda is one of those people who I think, needs that nuance. And you have to realize, like, she is a refugee who was, and this is pretty fucked up, she was taken in by the man who was in responsible for her family dying.
Right.
He didn't outright drop the bomb, but it was him and his family, his company that made the weapons and sold them.
He signed his name on it. Oh wait, no, it was Chris Evans. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, that was Chris Evans. Yeah, his name happened to be on it. But yeah. So like after seeing what led Wanda to do this, I was like, oh.
But I would argue that's a reason, not an excuse, right? Like a pedophile, right? A lot of times pedophiles were molested as children, and they kind of take that trauma and they wind up not knowing how to break that cycle, and they become the very thing that, hurt them. And I don't think that, you can give them a free pass because they had a horrible, life or a horrible experience, but you definitely can see the reason why they wound up that way and understand them a little better.
Editor's note here, because this is a very sensitive subject. We will have sources in the show notes that will tell you that while some individuals who end up abusing children were also abused themselves, they are not necessarily the majority. And there's a variety of other facts and debunked myths on the website that I'm including in the show notes. Back to the show.
And I've heard quotes, if you don't mind me jumping in there for a moment. I've heard, quotes too, and I won't get them necessarily verbatim, but the roundabout idea is you are not responsible for what happened to you.
Yeah.
But you are absolutely 100% responsible for how you try to work with it and how you treat others.
We have we said it on the podcast before, Ty? It explains it without excusing it.
I don't think we have, but
we haven't said that. We've said it a lot in our private conversations. But yeah, it explains it. It doesn't excuse it. Mm-hmm. Now, these first 2 episodes pissed me off so much.
Why?
And I'll tell you why. It's because, once again, I didn't watch the trailers. I had a feeling that it was going to be some kind of illusion that maybe she was responsible for, but I didn't see the part where it's like, all right, we have helicopters and shit, and there's other stuff happening now. Like, I just saw this, and I'm like, they know that they're just sticking, that we're going to stick with it because it's Marvel. And I did. Overall, I'm glad I stuck with it, but the first 2 episodes, I was like, oh my God. And by the way, much like Wanda, I did watch these shows growing up. My parents were not there late at night. They didn't care about what time I went to bed, so I would stay up and I would watch Nick at Night. And so Dick
same.
Van Dyke, Get Smart, I Love Lucy, Mary Tyler Moore Show, like all of those, a Brady Bunch, Happy Days, I did watch them. But I don't get that sense of nostalgia from those shows specifically. And we're gonna have stuff in the show notes and sources. But one of those things, I found an article on nostalgia, which was originally how do I put it? Nostalgia originally came about as disease. Like, that's what it was classified as. That, there were soldiers, I don't recall exactly which war, but there were soldiers who, when they were evaluated and they were longing to go home, the doctor diagnosed them with nostalgia. And he was like, oh, you should be looking forward, not back.
Interesting.
I actually don't know that one. That's really interesting.
Yeah, the way that we look at it now is obviously not like that, but man, if I can't relate to, we watched that Digimon movie earlier this year, and the whole thing was like, or earlier last year, or was like,
late last year,
don't don't cling to the past, look toward the future. You can't get lost in what the past was. And me, in an attempt to deal with everything in my life that I don't have time to go through, I do escape to nostalgia. And I think a lot of us do. How often are you like, man, I'm having a bad day. Let me watch this movie that always made me feel good inside. I'm having a bad day. Let me listen to this song that always makes me feel good. Let me, watch this TV show because it might not be the show, but it reminds me of the person who I was with when I watched it. Like, we sometimes the present, and especially now the present, at least for me, and I'm not speaking for everybody, lately I have been like an exposed nerve. I am sensitive to pretty much everything. And it does help to be able.
You are not alone.
Which I very much appreciate. Thank you. And those of you at home, neither are you. Which will be a big part of our Snyder Cut review if we end up doing that. When we end up doing it, we'll figure it out. I'll talk to Ty, see if I could Tyler Hayward manipulate him into doing the Snyder Cut with it. Aha!
But no, I think that's really valid, what you're saying about nostalgia. And I think specifically for me, nostalgia, it's a lot of times it's one thing that really got me through a tough time. I mentioned in the Lord of the Rings episode that, there was a lot of trauma going on in my family, at the time when The Fellowship of the Ring came out on VHS, and I would watch that movie over and over and over again. And I can sit there and watch that movie over and over again now because I think it gives me that same comforting feeling that I needed, during that time. So, we see Wanda do that here, right? We find that she went into these TV shows for comfort, right? When there was a war right outside her door, and bombs were blowing up the city, and people were dying in the streets, and her family would sit there for movie night, and she would pick out one of her favorite sitcoms to watch. And I definitely can relate to that. And I understand why she would feel that comfort, and I think a lot of people probably do that all the time.
Escapism. It's escapism.
Yeah.
And when it isn't too much, it's a healthy coping mechanism. And when it invades living your life, then it's maladaptive coping mechanism. But it is escapism. It does exactly what it's meant to do. We get lost in something else.
And, I think that life in general, like, we just need to know that there's a balance for everything, because I think escapism, in the right doses is it's important for us to do. Like, we really have to, especially, like us, like we are very tuned into what's going on politically and in our world, more so in the country, the United States, that, for this podcast, that like I have to remind myself to turn it off. Because literally, it doesn't matter. Literally, we could be watching anything, and I'm like, cop wouldn't do that in real life, like, or I'm just, or I'm just thinking. I'm thinking, and I'm like, man, I can't believe this is going on. How can I be happy? And sometimes you really, you do have to escape, but you do have to realize that also there is a real world, and there are real people who may depend on you, and that those people do need you. Another thing about this series is they were very, conscious about using the stages of grief to guide their their storytelling. So, now they had 5 stages of grief. I formerly remember 7 stages of grief, but Matt Shackman said 5, so I'm using the 5 here, which are denial. We see Wanda denying everything as she escapes into this world where her husband is still alive. We see anger. Anytime anybody calls her out on it, she manages to cut them out. Or, Monica, she throws through the hex.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ty said earlier, she confronts Sword and Hayward and threatens them with that, don't come into my home. Excuse me. We also see bargaining, which she is so desperate to have her brother back that she accepts someone she's never met as her brother. Like, she is willing to, to accept that. And then, of course, depression, which is when we were in our Modern Family episode, and acceptance. I don't know if she's gone to accept it. Maybe we'll talk about that at the end. But I just want to talk about the depression episode in Modern Family. And I know that I said I was going to go through order, but it's a quick thing. Just, I suck at this. I make the schedule and then I break it, and I don't do anything. But I feel like these are words that are now so popular that formerly weren't. Words like trauma,
Mm-hmm.
grief, therapy. We had this kind of this storytelling that we see in our movies and our shows and our commercials that kind of speak to our nihilism. That, like, memes kind of dictate everything, and like it was just. I'm glad that it is in the zeitgeist. I really am. I'm glad that it's out there. I'm glad that they said the word trauma on this show so people can, like, be aware of it.
And it normalizes it, so it makes it easier for people to start talking about it.
Yeah, and for someone to say, like, if that superhero can go through this, or in Tyler's opinion, this terrible villainous person. If a so-called hero can go through this, then then it's normal for me to go through it. And for those of you who are like, well, it's a fantasy, it doesn't make sense, blah, 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 there are people who believe very much in their fantasies and wage wars for them because of something that was written in a book a long time ago. So I have my mythology. Everybody else can have theirs. But I didn't expect to connect with Wanda as much as I did growing up as a man. But like one of those surreal things about this to me was that growing up, every one of our superheroes was always older than us. Even Tobey Maguire, who was supposed to be playing 17, 18-year-old Peter Parker, was a solid 25, 30 years old. But to see Wanda born in the same year we were, I know you're a little older than we are, Antonia,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still a millennial, right?
I don't know. I'm in that weird category where I'm like in between.
You might be Gen X.
Not in between
or an
Gen
elder
X. What do they
millennial.
call it? Zennial, when you're between Gen X and millennial, or am I getting Zennial
Oh, I didn't know
wrong?
that was the thing.
I might be
I don't
getting
know,
the
you might
term
be.
wrong.
Nobody wants to be a millennial, so they came up with additional terms to break the category up more.
Honestly, yeah. They're like, oh, these millennials are ruining the economy with avocado toast. You're like, all right, I'm an elder millennial.
Okay,
So,
I just Googled it quickly to get this right. It is Zennials. This
what
is
is
from Wikipedia.
Zennial.
Zennials is a, how do you say that word? Portmanteau. All right, I bastardized that word. Not sure. Anyway, blending the words Generation X and Millennials to describe a micro generation or a crossover generation of people whose birth years are between the late 70s and the early to mid 1980s. But to answer your question, yes, I'm relatively in the same age group.
Oh, it's a combination of words. Got it. Podcast, for example. Combination of iPod and broadcast. Podcast. So yeah, the second definition of portmanteau is a combination of words. Now we know that. Good job, everybody.
I didn't know that word
We'll learn
before. I've
something
learned
today.
something. And I mispronounced it.
But this is like, at least for me, like the first, my millennial hero. Wanda Maximoff is my millennial hero. She watched the same shows I watched growing up. She is part of that generation, and I think that, you know, we are part of that generation that this is so important to, because we were raised by television for the most part. You know, there was a time where people were raised by at least one parent, if not both. You know, because they could be supported off of a single income household. But like, you know, for us, like, we are a part of that generation where the cost of living went up and all of our parents had to go to work, and we're left with the TV. Like, you know, at least to me, movies and television and entertainment are probably one of the most important parts, definitely one of the most important parts of my life, if not the most important. Like, that is how I communicate with people. That is how I read into emotions. You know, like, and I know that's not the healthiest thing to do, but, you know, outside of, I never really had like actual adults to teach me how to interact with people or healthily express my feelings. And, you know, I've only had movies and shows to do it, which is, you know, for better or worse. There's a lot of worse in there too. Ty, you part of that generation too? You love movies, right?
Yeah, some might say that. I definitely love movies, and you know, I think I've spent a lot of my childhood, you know, watching them and growing up with them, watching ones that I probably shouldn't have seen as a child, you know, horror movies, action movies, but all kinds of stuff. And obviously that made me want to go to film school and you know, get more involved in, you know, in the filmmaking process. So yeah, I mean, I definitely was raised by that. You know, I really enjoyed Wanda in this. I don't think I had the same connection you seem to. Maybe it's just because I have different things I want out of life, you know, than she did. Like, I'm not looking to start a family, things like that. So it wasn't as easy to relate in that regard.
Whoa.
But
I'm not either, everybody. Just letting you know. I got my dog and my wife. It's good for now. All right?
I got my cats and my girlfriend. That's what I got. So, but yeah, I mean, I thought she, you know, it was interesting, I think, to see, you know, her going through all these stages of grief and of course, you know, starting a family and all that kind of stuff. And those things still in my mind make you, are for people who are older than me. And then I realize she's the same age and I go, well, no, it's not. You know, it's our generation that is, you know, in this place in our lives now. So that was definitely, you know, kind of interesting to think back and reflect on. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I have the same connection you do with being raised by the TV, only because my mother did not always work, so I wasn't always allowed to watch the television. But what I did absolutely connect with was, you know, since we didn't have regular cable because she didn't want me seeing things like HBO, etc. So
it's HBO. It's not TV. No, that was one of their
I remember
big
that.
marketing things in the 90s. Yeah, right. But yeah, you were saying, what did you watch?
So I mean, I did watch a lot of like when I was much younger. I know a lot about. I mean, I'm a little rusty on details now, but I watched a lot of like 70s children's show, like 3-2-1 Connect and stuff like that, and
Wow.
because it was on, you know, PBS, because I was very limited and watched. But at the same time too, I was allowed to watch things like the Dick Van Dyke Show, and my grandparents used to love the Honeymooners, and of course I loved Bewitched, which obviously there's a reference to Bewitched in WandaVision as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I loved that one. I was like, yay! So like, so through watching those older shows that I was allowed to watch, I mean, so that like that's kind of that's my connection to the older stuff and why I got excited. And then of course we see later on like references to, there was like a little nod to like Full House.
Which works on a lot of levels too, because Elizabeth Olsen grew up on the set of Full House, which is so funny.
Yeah.
You know, she wasn't featured in Full House, but she grew up on the set of it with her sisters, Mary Kate and Ashley.
Mm-hmm. So like I saw that one. Of course, that show was watched in our house. So, you know, a lot of the shows reference that she watched, which are, you know, all, we'll say TV wholesome shows, we'll say. Those were all the ones I was allowed to watch, so I get nearly every reference.
It's funny you mentioned that because we didn't usually have cable either. So I don't know if maybe you weren't allowed to watch cable, but we just didn't have it.
We didn't have
couldn't
it.
afford it. I was constantly watching VHSs over and over and over again. The same shows, the same movies. You know, when we ended up upgrading to DVDs, same thing there too. Like I can almost verbatim recite the first 3 episodes of Batman Beyond because that was the only VHS I had of that show, and I would watch it over and over.
It kept it simpler, right? Now it's like you have all this stuff at your fingertip and you don't know what to watch because you have 150 streaming services that have all the content in the world, you know? At least you used to be able to just be like, hey, I'm going to watch one of my 5 favorite movies or shows that I have on DVD or VHS.
You know, there's this feeling where, like, you know, I would finally get done what I'm doing. You know, I would make like an awesome meal, great meal. I would smoke a fat, milky bong rip, you know, right? And just, you know, get into a really nice headspace and then be like, all right, what am I going to watch? What's going to make this combination of food and me be, you know, and dopamine like great? And I always go back to stuff I've already seen. I always go back to, you know, the stuff I know is fun, the stuff, you know, I know is not going to upset me. And like, that's exactly what Wanda does. You know, because a lot of you can't eat a meal unless you have the perfect thing to watch while you're eating it. You'll let that meal go cold.
True.
Before you.
True.
You know, but yeah. So actually, do we want to go through the episodes, or we just want to bring specific points?
I like just bouncing around. I think, you know,
Bouncing
keeps
around?
the
Let's bounce
conversation
around.
Yeah, I
going.
mean,
folks.
bouncing around works for me because I know you'd wanted me to talk about some of the ways she expresses her trauma, and you already mentioned a couple, so like, bouncing around works for me.
What else did you notice? Because I've actually been doing most of the talking, but I have you on here as a guest. So like, did you have notes? Did you have anything you wanted to mention?
Even in the beginning, when we, even as a viewer, especially me not knowing anything about Wanda prior to this or Vision, so watching it and you're kind of like, you get that they're recreating this, you know, old TV show, but you know, there are times where, what was it, when Vision's boss came over for dinner, and at one point his boss's wife is like, stopped this, but it was like to the camera. And although that wasn't Wanda, it was kind of like one of the first inklings that, at least the first one that stuck out
Something's
to me,
off.
that something's off. And who is she saying stop that to? Is she saying stop him choking, or stop that, you know, as we know, people start to kind of like, will say things. Well, actually, you know, this all blends in. So I won't even stick to the first episode. But then there are other parts where someone's kind of like, do you need me to redo that? And she's like, what? You know, she's still not quite realizing what's going on herself yet. But when they do say something off and we catch that something's off, she kind of just goes, it's a little bit of denial. Like, I don't know. What do you mean? Like, just this kind of just denial.
Yeah, well, that actually, it reminds me of like one thing that I really wasn't a fan of Wanda doing in this show, and that was gaslighting Vision. Now, Wanda was also gaslit, and for those of you who aren't aware what gaslighting is, I only learned what it actually means this past year. Turns out that was like my father's prime parenting technique, was gaslighting. But gaslighting is when someone, normally an abuser or a fucking narcissist, whatever, somebody will try and downplay your emotions and make you feel like they're not valid. You know, make you feel like, you know, you're not seeing things the way they actually are, and that your feelings are skewed, your point of view is skewed, and it really makes you question yourself. And, for credit to Wanda, she made a damn good copy of Vision because he becomes self-aware almost in like the first episode. He starts questioning everything. What do we do with this job? He knows he has these powers. He doesn't know exactly where they come from. But as he keeps bringing it up, Wanda keeps kind of squashing it back and being like, what are you talking about? Like you said, partially it's her denial, but I think also like once she realized what's going on, she wants to keep Vision there, for herself. And that is, I mean, it's really messed up to create a life like that and then do that to them.
Yeah.
Like, and kudos to him. He is a ride or die. He stays with her through the very end. He's like, I love you. Vishan, he's one of the loyal guys. He's one of the real ones.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good that you bring up that point because she did move from the absolutely. I absolutely agree. I know I'm repeating pretty much what you said, but she did move from a place of not realizing what she was doing and denial to actively, once she started to figure it out, actively manipulating him, which is not okay by any means.
Yeah.
I just wanted to call out too, at the end, even stays back to, feminist point. He stays back at the end of the movie to watch the kids so that Wanda could go do her thing and save the world.
Yeah, that's right. He was like, yo, you do your thing.
So he's a very good feminist.
I was going to say about that, actually. It's kind of interesting that, Vision's such a emotional person, right? He's very empathetic and kind and a great partner, and he's not he wasn't really born of this world, right? He was created. He's he's like an android. It took an android to find this like really good man. So I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there. That I thought
that's a great point. Like he has such an insight into the human condition, despite not being a human. But I think that, and this is kind of going into the MCU a little bit more broadly. That's what he was created for. Ultron made the Vision's body as the next step in human evolution.
Right.
The perfect blend of technology and organic life. Oh shit. We're gonna have a real moment. I mentioned before on the podcast, y'all, my mom's dead. And which is another thing, like with this whole grief thing. So I used it against Ty so many times when he was like, I didn't get out of it what you did. And I was like, oh, my mom's so dead and Wanda had a dead guy. And I'm like, you wouldn't understand. But Vision, he has this line with Ultron at the end of the second Avengers film, and it was the first scene that I watched the morning after my mom had passed. And I had been doing nothing but throwing around a bunch of jokes the night before. And then finally the next morning came, my ex-fiance, now wife, left for work, and I was alone. This is before we had a dog. It was just me. And out of nowhere, Age of Ultron isn't even my favorite movie. I looked up that scene that Vision has at the end with Ultron, and he says, I'm paraphrasing, he says to Ultron, he goes, humans somehow believe that chaos and order are opposites. They try to control what won't be. But there's beauty in their failings. And Ultron says pretty much like, they're doomed people. You know that, right? And he goes, yeah. But a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts. And that right there, Vision was already in my heart, And I'll bring up the other quote, the big one from this whole series.
Oh,
which
yeah.
Everybody's talking about Vision's quote on grief.
Yeah, I don't know why it took me this long to realize that either, because, Vision's talking to Wanda shortly after she joins the Avengers, and, he's connecting with her. Both of them created to be weapons, so they have that. And he says, what is grief if not love persevering? And that hit me so hard when I saw that, because I think we feel that there are negative emotions in this world, right? But I'm not sure there are, right? Like every emotion we have has been built into us by however many years of evolution, 5-10 years of evolution, that these emotions are built into us for a reason. We just have to find healthy ways of expressing them. And grief is not a bad emotion. And I always feel guilty for feeling it because, you want nothing more than to get over the death of a loved one as fast as you can so you don't have to feel that way anymore. But now when I feel grief, I'm just reminded it's because I still love that person that's gone. And that I don't need to feel bad for feeling that grief. But it's just a part of me. And that every time I'm sad for them, or sad that I don't have them in my life anymore, it's because I still love them, and it's a little more comforting. And I hope that Paul Bettany never gets any allegations against him or anything in the future. If he gets me too, I'm gonna be so fucking mad.
Hey, he didn't write the line, okay? So
Well,
that's true. He didn't write it. He just delivered it.
yeah, and I read an interview where he said that line was a last minute add-in. It wasn't originally in the script.
Oh, interesting.
Oh man, you did so much more research than I did. No, you should be hosting this episode.
No, I couldn't host it. I couldn't host it.
But man,
I tend I'll pick up things here and there that might not be relevant to. I go down rabbit holes when I'm researching for one thing, so I kind of just found that on the way.
Hey, well, I'm glad you did, Alice. But yeah, that line, that was the entire series for me. That was my payoff. I mean, the superhero fight in the sky at the end was just a icing on the cake. It was, I guess cakes usually have icing. It was a bonus. It was icing on the icing of the cake, guys.
And funny, that's not even the part that sticks out the most to me. It's the overall story. After watching it through, the things that stick out are like when she's talking to her sons and she's saying, when their dog dies, and she's giving them advice on don't jump forward in age, don't run from your problems, and I forgot the exact quote that she says about, yeah, and a reference to grief, and you need to learn how to deal with it. This is absolutely not even close to verbatim, but that just like that essence of she's telling them to do what she's not doing herself yet.
Ooh.
So it's like little things like that really stuck out to me. Just their bond stuck out to me. And then, probably like the biggest thing that really you hear things like when people can't handle trauma, we talk about denial, but we also talk about escapism, maladaptive coping skills, dissociation, and people will have this whole world. And I don't know if maladaptive daydreaming fits into this, but you have all those responses to trauma where somebody's kind of living in a different world because of it in their own head. But because of her powers, something that would be just I don't know if psychological condition, but symptoms of a trauma response that she literally manifested into reality. And that's just I think that's pretty powerful. And things like that really stood out to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, for me, this is probably going to be a little strange. It's kind of a small part of the show, but my favorite scenes and moments were when we kind of focused on Monica a little bit, and they showed everyone coming back from the snap, from the Thanos snap. I thought the scene was shot really well. The intensity of it, the showing the hospital completely overwhelmed, and just seeing how somebody comes back and not knowing they were gone that whole time. And I'm going to be pretty unpopular for this opinion, but I was kind of team Thanos when he did the snap, because I definitely understood why he was doing it. Yeah, pretty much. We talk about it all the time, the planet's dying, right? And we're not doing anything to protect
That's completely over my head.
That's fine. You're a flag smasher.
That's fine. Yeah. And in I believe it was in Infinity. No, it was in Endgame that Captain America mentioned. Oh, I saw whales in the Hudson River, and little things showing that animal life and the planet itself are kind of healing from the snap. And now you have all these people appearing again 5 years later. And, what kind of trauma does that create? For Monica, her mom was dead, right? She was just, she missed her mom dying. And, she's like shocked, right? She doesn't even understand. She doesn't know she's been gone.
And she missed it.
She thought, she woke up from her nap, and they're like, your mom died like 2 years ago or whatever it was, and I thought that was kind of wild. And my favorite TV show of all time is The Leftovers, and they really dealt with the grief of a very similar situation in which people just mysteriously disappeared off the earth.
I'm gonna cut
So
you
I've
off.
always
real quick.
yeah, good.
I knew it was important to you. I didn't know it was your favorite show of all time. I would have watched it sooner, dude. I'm sorry.
That's why I kept pushing it.
I know
That's
you
why I
keep
kept
pushing
it.
Yeah. This, and also that's a way we communicate with each other. If I love something, I'm going to share it with you, and then we could both love it together. I knew you really liked the show. I didn't know it was that to you. I'm going to watch Leftovers sooner.
Yeah.
Sorry, but continue.
That show hit the emotional chords that you're getting from WandaVision. So, I just thought it was a really interesting concept. I wish they had explored that more, in Endgame and other Marvel properties. So it was really cool to see that, and just dealing with how people react to that. How does the world react to all these people suddenly appearing again? And we've seen that kind of playing out here. We even see it in the Falcon and Winter Soldier, which is now airing. So I thought that was a really, really great way to kind of explore that through Monica and her character, who was very, very strong through most of the series. I feel like she kind of got pushed to the side in the last episode or two. I was kind of bummed to see her arc kind of stall there, but she was pretty interesting. And again, that was kind of like the moment that stood out to me.
Dude, when she became Spectrum, I lost it. I was like, what?
Yeah,
here
it was awesome.
we go, And unfortunately, yeah, she really did take a back seat in the last episode. And I know that, they had to do what they had to do, but honestly, they went 8 episodes telling a story. So give me, the 9th episode doesn't have to be spectacle.
Yeah.
I don't need that. I've seen that in the movies. I've seen Wanda do incredible things. She freaking fought Thanos. She saved Black Widow, from Thanos's hordes and stuff. She owned the Vision. And once again, not once again, but I've said it before, an amazing line. I can't control how they see me.
Yeah.
But she's done all of that stuff, and it was so cool to see her finally become the Scarlet Witch. But I totally would have been down for a bit more of a philosophical thing. Luckily, the guys did that. The 2 women fucking beat the shit out of each other, and the guys were like, "Let's settle this." All right.
It was Vision confronting Vision, right? It was the soul of Vision confronting the body of Vision. So it was, there's a lot to kind of dissect there, even. His body, right? The white Vision kind of realizing that, this is who he was at one time, and not being able to remember any of the things he experienced or feel them. And then, the Wanda creative Vision giving him those memories back, because a part of him lives inside Wanda, right? The part of the Mind Stone that holds, a little piece of his soul. And that wakes something up in this soulless husk to the point where he
unlocked it.
Yeah,
he unlocked all of those memories that were in the hardware.
And now he's dissecting all that, right? And I don't know if he can even feel the emotions, but he knows he should. And I think that's kind of a pretty intense experience for someone to suddenly be overwhelmed with those memories and have to sift through that.
That moment was one of my favorites also. He, when they did the Ship of Theseus, which, had been brought to me prior. I used to work at a Chinese restaurant with this huge anime fan, and he told me about the Ship of Theseus argument while also describing the Ghost in the Shell theory series to me. So, but honestly, by the time, the person I am now, I don't have any of the original cells that I had when I was born. I have those memories and stuff, but but I don't. I'm physically a different person. Those cells have died and regenerated many times over.
Trippy.
So, when you think about that, so that is the Ship of Theseus argument, and if it stands true for us, then of course it stands true for Vision, even more so because he actually has the physical body that he had when he was born.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a political thing or social thing, but I loved that moment. I was like, yeah. And also, progress. Let's see women beat the crap out of each other with magic instead of the guys doing it.
Well, I think it also kind of brings up the point of like, which the MCU has kind of hit on a lot with Vision is, what makes a living being? What is a soul? And, Vision is not necessarily flesh and blood, right? He wasn't born of a human, but, you could argue that, like you said earlier, that he might be the most empathetic of all these characters and most human of all. And, what is his soul? Was it the Mind Stone? Was it his memories? What makes him...
What Banner programmed? Was it Jarvis? Yeah,
and
so much.
I don't think he knows that. And that's probably going to be something I hope they explore later on, right? He does survive. He goes off to kind of figure this out. And I hope they do kind of
maybe
get through this. Or he'll just show up one day and be like, hey, I'm Vision, I'm back. And it's like, oh, cool, he's here to fight.
I defied myself. Imagine he shows up. Wanda's like, oh my God, Viz. And he's like, hey, nice to meet you again, Wanda. Here's my wife, Jennifer. Here are our children. Imagine, dude. Like, he comes back living his best life, and she's like, oh no.
That'd be terrible.
Everyone runs because she hexes again.
Did you ever read Tom King's Vision?
I did read Tom King's Vision.
Yeah.
And for those of you who haven't, I only read one trade. I didn't even read the whole run. I loved it. It was incredible, and it was very much. And I know this is a digression. Also, hopefully, we're not coming in over runtime here. But my favorite part in that whole series is when one of Vision's kids, who he built, by the way, is getting in trouble because someone was bullying him, and he just hit the kid's carotid artery, pressed it and knocked him out.
Yeah.
And he was like, I just turned, I flipped his off switch, Dad. And Vision's like, oh shit, bro. That's not what you can do to humans. But the principal is giving Vision shit. And he's like, 862. The principal's like, what? And he's like, I've been with the Avengers for my entire life, and I've saved the world with them countless times, but there are 862 moments specifically in which I was the deciding factor between the destruction of the human race. And he goes, you wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for one of those 862 moments I saved you. I was like, oh, damn, Vision. That's my favorite moment.
That was a great moment.
Oh, it was so good. But yeah, let's see. Is there anything we didn't touch on?
Well, something I wanted to bring up that I thought was important because when Agatha, I could speak Agatha, kind of kidnapped her in her basement, dungeon, witch cave, whatever you want to call it, and
witch cave. I like that. She has like an Xbox and a little mini bar.
Well, I forgot what she referenced it to as, but her space, and she had her. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't she describe it when Wanda realized she couldn't use her powers? It was because
she said it was a given space. But that's definitely like her dungeon. That's her base of operations. So
Wanda wasn't able to use. Oh, she wasn't able to use her powers because I believe she said. Agatha said she cast...
Only the witch who cast the runes.
Cast the runes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me on that one.
I got you.
Anyway, so she's now stuck with Agatha on this disturbing field trip through all of her traumas, which, at least as a viewer, if you aren't familiar with her backstory, gives us the backstory. So I'm sure that's the purpose of that.
Honestly... That's more backstory than we pretty much ever got. We've heard them talk about it a little bit, but this was like, oh, so this is what happened. So yeah, this is her.
It was a
definitive
necessary way to get backstory in there. But one of my favorite lines, and I hope I get it right, is when Agatha realizes she could no longer use her powers. It's because Wanda goes, "Thank you for the lesson, but you don't get to tell me who I am." And she had learned from her to cast the runes.
Just before that, she, when Wanda, quote unquote, gives her the magic, she believes that she's won. And she says, oh, about that spell, it's broken. Once a spell is cast, it can't be fixed. It's broken, just like you. And yeah, Wanda says, I don't need you to tell me who I am. And I love that moment as well. That was great. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because I almost forgot that part.
I wanted to mention it, and then I kept losing it, and then it kept coming back, and then I didn't want to interrupt, and I'm like, yes, I remembered.
No, I was going to say, at the very end, right, Wanda kind of embraces who she is now, right? She becomes a Scarlet Witch. this chaos magic. There's some insidious undertones possibly to what she's capable of. What do you both make of her, where she's at the end of the series?
Well, I think she's definitely got some more introspection going on for the first time in a while. By the end of all of this, and she's got these powers, and I need to bring up something which, Mike, I know you really liked, that scene in the end after credits.
I love
which is
that
relevant
scene. That is the
which
scene
is relevant
that,
to this.
Yeah.
Which is relevant to this because it's she's and I forgot what the term was. She was having the outer body
an astral projection, also known as an outer body experience, or an OB for short.
And she's studying that book. So while she's kind of like, she's outside, she's in her sweatpants, comfy clothes, having a cup of something, looking at the scenery, and inside, the Scarlet Witch is studying the book. So I think it's to be determined. At least she's learning about herself, I guess, so to speak, or the legend.
Yeah, and I guess if you want to, glean something from that for all of us in our everyday lives, Wanda is not able to escape her trauma. She's not able to escape the terrible things that she's done. And I say that as somebody who has done terrible things. I've been manipulative. I've been narcissistic in the past. And for somebody who loves superheroes so much, I remember once somebody did tell me this. She said, for somebody who loves superheroes so much, you don't act like any of them. And, you could relate that to when Agatha tells Wanda, she says, heroes don't torture people. You're not a hero. So I think that, Wanda can't run from any of that. But what she can do is she can find a way to become her best self. Mm-hmm. And instead of running from her magic and running from what makes her her, she's now able to lean into it and be like, listen, this is magic. I am the Scarlet Witch. Let me learn everything I can. That being said, she is learning it from the Darkhold. Now, we learned in the Doctor Strange movie there are no forbidden books, but like forbidden practices. They're kind of vague on that. And in the Doctor Strange movie, we saw that he was able to do the same technique, but his body wasn't conscious. So not from a social or political stance, but just from a I can't wait to fucking see what happens, I'm a comic book fan stance, I can't wait to see what fucking happens. She's splitting both of her psyches. Or, is it the fact that she is a Nexus being and is the Scarlet Witch is present throughout all realities? There's a lot going on there. But yeah, let's just equate that, to therapy. Like, lean into what makes you you. Don't run away from the past. Find a way to dissect it. Find a way to glean the best parts from it and use it to, to make you, I don't want to say a better person because you're not bad now. I don't want to say a stronger person because you're not weak now. I just want, a more whole person, because that's what we have to be. Even if you're in a relationship, that other person isn't supposed to be your other half. They're supposed to complement you. You are both wholes to each other. Okay, I'm not depending on someone to fill in a hole in me. I have to be the best person I can be, so that way we can be the best we can be together.
Nice.
So I think that is, that's what Wanda's doing, and I want to let everybody know that scene inspired a T-shirt design that I did. It is not available on any site because Disney took it down, but if you want to email us at politipopcast@gmail.com, I will find a way to get a T-shirt sent out to you. It is a WandaVision T-shirt. It has a few like different nods to everything in the series. Each of the commercial items that were presented representing different parts of Wanda's life in the episodes, the different characters. It's got Monica Rambeau, it's got Agatha, it's got Billy and Tommy, it's got the Visions, and it has Darcy as well. And it also has the runes. So yeah.
I'll have to model it for you. So I bought one.
I didn't realize that Disney was not a fan of fan art.
No, they're all over
Well,
that.
if I'm making money off of their fan art, that's the thing. But also, if you want to, say, Disney, I'll tell you guys this. Walt Disney was a fucking rat during the Red Scare, ratting out people who were unionizing, saying that they were communists. So fuck him.
I did not know
and he
that.
also might have been an anti-Semite. I don't have any evidence of that, but I've heard rumors. And why wouldn't he be? He was just a guy with a mustache who loved a mouse.
If you look at some of his early cartoons, he was probably a racist too. So Let's
yeah.
just say Walt Disney probably wasn't the greatest guy.
But I'll say Marvel shouldn't care about stealing ideas because that's how they became who they were. Stan Lee taking Jack Kirby's ideas.
Thanos is just dark side light.
Yes, Thanos is just dark side light. But yeah, so I was surprised. But anyway, so if you want to get it from me, they can't stop me from printing it on a T-shirt for myself because it's my art, and then selling it to you. So fuck them. Let the little guy get a few bucks. But yeah, so that was cool. She's now, coming into her own. Last thing I'm going to say, just as a fan, I loved all the references they had to not only the movies but the comics. The Halloween episode was my favorite because they had the OG costumes of these characters. I'm not going to talk about the whole. I'm not going to talk about the whole Quicksilver red herring because.
Oh, I was going to say that was such bullshit. For a dick joke, they did all that for a boner joke. Like,
well, what's funny is Boner was actually the name of a character on Growing Pains.
Yeah,
and Matt Shackman was a child actor on Growing Pains.
They still made a joke about it though. In
maybe he was laughing because he was like, "Oh, Boner," just like from that guy in Growing Pains. I couldn't even say it with a straight face. I did want to talk my last bit. It's not my last bit because I also wanted to bring up a little bit about the military-industrial complex. But one of my last bits is going to be Agatha's the hero, in my opinion.
Really?
Because she saves everybody by convincing Wanda what she needs to do.
Well, more so, Agatha was the one who started fucking with the hex. She started messing with the illusion. Yeah. And that's what started making Wanda have to either expand it or change it. It was Agatha in episode 5 who did that whole, "Oh, do you want me to take that again?" She did that and made Vision question Wanda. She played them against each other.
Yeah.
She did it outside the house too when Wanda was inside with Monica. So Agatha is the one who pushed the hex and made Wanda alter it. And when Wanda altered it, she lost control over it. And that's how she was able to figure out what she was doing this whole time. And that's how these people were able to get free. So, and Agatha, did she hurt any of the civilians in that town, in Westview?
I don't think she did, no.
Agatha's the hero.
Technically, Sparky.
She killed Sparky, too.
She did kill Sparky. But was Sparky real? I don't know.
That's a tough call. Oh, dude, do you want to get into that? Were any of them real? Was Vision real? Was Tommy and Billy real? That's a whole other philosophical discussion.
I mean, it is, right? It is.
It honestly is. And even so, if you make those people, are you then allowed to do anything you want to them or with them? Are you allowed to control when they live or die like Wanda did? That's a tough call. I get sad when I kill innocent people in video games.
Yeah.
So I'm not the person
to ask.
I get
sad when my Digimon Tamagotchi dies. So.
Oh, dude.
Oh my gosh.
Now that's the trauma.
I don't like.
That's what I should have brought
I'm trying this new game on Switch and I don't like it because I hate killing the monsters. There's definitely something wrong with me.
No, it means you're compassionate. That's what it means. We may feel like it's wrong to have these emotions, but that's because we've been told to. Going back to the very beginning of the episode, Antonia, you said men are taught to behave a certain way growing up and women are taught a certain way to behave growing up. And the way that we're taught to behave is it's not to be emotional. It's that there's only 2 emotions we're allowed to have. And the spectrum is so much wider than that. I've seen people the men specifically, that the only way they know how to react to things are anger, right? And when you think about it, think of your MAGA folks, all right? Because it wouldn't be the PolitiPop podcast if we didn't bring that in. Think about I'm angry at these immigrants, blah, blah, blah. No, you're afraid of them because you were told some misinformation about them. You're afraid. That's what you are. You don't know how to express your fear. You can be sad about something and not know how to express that sadness. All you know how to express is anger, and that's what we see all the time, right? We see men in all sorts of shows and different media that all they are allowed to express is anger or being stoic. That's it. But women, they're the ones who get emotional. They're the ones who get sad. But it's just that they are able to show the broad spectrum of their emotions. As a man, I should be able to talk to someone and say, "You made me sad," or "What you did made me feel sad." I should be able to say that. I should be able to have that vocabulary. Because otherwise, if you can't express your emotions, that's when they come out in toxic ways.
Absolutely.
Ty, did you want to talk a little bit about the military-industrial complex? Because they definitely bring that up with Sword and...
They kind of paint Sword in a really bad light in this show. I think S.H.I.E.L.D. got a little bit of a better representation throughout the MCU in terms of not always being evil, but...
and even then, they were infiltrated by Nazis.
Yeah,
it's a low bar.
Right off the bat, Monica and her relationship with Hayward, right? Her mom, I believe, also worked for them, right? Because her mom was best friends with Captain Marvel.
Yeah, her mom was the director, if not the founder of Sword. I should know more about that, but I was more into the Wanda story.
And quite revered, I thought I understood.
Yeah, and that, Hayward took over in the interim while Monica's mom was gone. But man, if that wasn't like nail on the head, right?
Right.
He sees Wanda and sees her as a terrorist, somebody who is radicalized, while not knowing. And Jimmy Woo even says, he's like, that's an oversimplification, but okay. There's a lot more to that, and just as Americans in general, we're told the narrative by the mainstream media of like, oh, these terrorists did this thing. So automatically when we refer to them as terrorists, not these people, these rebels. Rebels could go either way, right? It doesn't have to be a good thing or a bad thing, but saying someone is a terrorist, you're already painting them, saying, oh, they're radicalized, blah, blah, blah. And that's he sees everyone. He sees Wanda as a radicalized terrorist and as a weapon, and he sees Vision as a weapon. And
his first reaction is to bring in tanks and bombs and guns and kill her, even when Darcy and Agent Woo are kind of begging him to take a different approach, and Monica
Jimmy Woo Fed.
Monica said if she's the problem, she's the solution. Isn't she the one that said that?
Right, yeah, and she knows that she can connect with her. She was been inside there. She understands, that she can reason with Wanda, and he's like, well, fuck that, we're gonna kill her. So, that's his first reaction.
Yeah, and Monica felt the grief while she was inside too, so she understood. She was literally Wanda's only ally, but nobody was listening to her.
Yeah, absolutely. She recognizes the grief and knows that what Wanda has done is not coming from a place of aggression. Mm-hmm. It's coming from a place of pain.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, the ultimate slap in the face, though, is, he literally uses Vision as a weapon, right? He was a living being who died to save the world, the universe even. And he basically revives his corpse and uses it to go in and try and kill them, and it's just like, he has no empathy for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
No, and that is the military-industrial complex right there, and that's the U.S. government right there.
Yeah.
They see everything as far as numbers or weapons. How much money can this make me, or what can I, how can I use this thing to kill people?
And then once you're not useful for that anymore, what do? They send you home, and they don't help you, right? How many veterans don't get the help that they need because they're no longer useful to the military?
Yeah, they serve their country, and they kind of just let them hang in the wind after that.
For those of you who aren't aware, from its inception, the United States military has been all about sending poor people to fight for the interests of rich people. You can always buy your way out of service if you have enough money. The fortunate son himself, Cadet Bone Spurs, our previous president, who used the song Fortunate Son, I believe at one point, not realizing that it was about him and people like him.
Which is hilarious.
It really is, but yeah, since its inception, the United States military has been for that specifically. You believe it. I'm fighting for my country. I'm protecting people. What are you protecting? My rights are not in danger in another country. If someone gets boots on the ground in on Long Island, of another foreign country says like, we're here to take your rights. Show me where all your rights are and I'll take them, or whatever. It just doesn't make sense when you really break it down. It is poor people being led into this trap of patriotism and this this veil of like, oh, what I'm doing is helping people and stuff. Meanwhile, you are getting at it straight out of high school and putting your life on the line for a senator who couldn't give a fuck about you.
Yep.
For people who just want money, who just want oil. and they really couldn't care less. So, and that is Hayward to a T. He says, instead of bringing the Vision back to life, bring him online. When Wanda wants to bury him, he says, we can't put $3 million worth of vibranium in the ground, which, by the way, $3 million is definitely not a lot of money for the military.
No.
That's like, that's 10 Syrian kids dead. That's like, that's nothing.
They spend trillions, right? That's like
trillions on drone strikes and everything else. But yeah, I did like how they threw that in there.
Yeah. And it's Monica who ultimately makes a very selfless decision, right, to go back into, Wanda's world and try and save her before Hayward, makes things worse. And, ultimately, again, just a person acting on their own against the military because they refuse to help.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, a woman of color that everyone refuses to listen to.
Yep.
Also, same Jimmy Woo, person of color that everyone refuses to listen to, and Darcy,
Kat Dennings,
qualified. Yes, Kat Dennings, a very qualified and intelligent and capable woman that they wouldn't have even known about the Hex if it weren't for her. Mm-hmm. They bring these brains on and then don't want to listen to them. They just want to shoot at everything. Wanda's incredibly dangerous. Let's piss her off more. It fucking doesn't make any sense. I know that the show's not real, but the stuff we're talking about is very real. So that's why I get so passionate
fiction emulates real life.
Indeed, and that's why this whole podcast exists, because if a person puts finger to keyboard and types something, all of that person's biases and experiences are going into the keyboard and coming out on the page. So whether you want to believe it or not, and that's been a big thing Ty and I have been talking about too. Like, I don't see how anybody can be a comic book fan and not realize that they are about politics,
and social issues. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's more accurate.
Even though I haven't watched everything, and I don't necessarily follow one movie franchise over another or characters, and I see things here or there, even without even seeing them all disconnected. Even something like Lord of the Rings too, you see the commentaries throughout the fantasy, throughout the comics. Yeah. It's hard to not see it and go, oh, that makes me think of this or that event, or how people are treated by a government, or I could go on and on and on. But
no, you're absolutely right though. Yeah. Especially, Lord of the Rings was all about Tolkien's experiences going into World War I and about industrialization and stuff. And anyone who is a fantasy fan or a sci-fi fan or a comic book fan who doesn't want to acknowledge these things, you are remaining willfully blind.
Yeah.
The Captain America punching Hitler on the cover, on his first comic book cover, was done before we even went to war with Germany.
Amazing.
It was comic book creators who made that choice. And those comic book creators, we mentioned it in the Spider-Verse episode, were Jewish men who, who changed their names to escape persecution. And they took their experiences and put them into these characters who were leading double lives. And
well, just remember, there's good people on both sides, right?
There are good people on both sides, everybody, right? Yeah, don't put politics in my comic books. You got to be kidding me, bro. Or don't put it in my sci-fi. Every sci-fi movie up to Kong vs. Godzilla, which I was just watching earlier, is all about the evil corporation that values profits over people. Will and Yutani from the Aliens.
You literally wouldn't have any of this stuff without that.
You've got Star Wars. You've got Star Trek has their own version. It's a very different political stance, but they've got
socialist utopia.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. But it's infused in anything I've ever watched.
Yeah. And you just gotta, like I say at the end of every episode, people, I'm not saying it just to say it. You have to read between the lines, because on another hand, entertainment, while it's there and it's great to help us escape, but every once in a while we got to come out of the hex. Entertainment is also there to keep us docile to an extent, so you have to be reading between the lines and seeing what people are saying. And when you do, you'll find that all of your favorite creators, except for J.K. Rowling and Nicholas Sparks, were freaking communists. That was their deal, They're all about the little guy over the big guy, fighting, for the people over corporations. Come on. But yeah, Agatha's the hero. Sword are a bunch of fucking, military industrial fucking imperialist fucking shills. Monica, can't wait. She can go to space and leave them behind now. That's man. I feel like I think I've said everything I needed to say, and I feel good for it personally. What about you two? Ty, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think we covered what I wanted to cover.
All right, Antonia, what about yourself?
I would say the biggies were covered, and just something that came to mind too related to what you just said. Something that I usually say to people is sometimes the only way to tell the truth is through fiction.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That is.
And I'm not gonna. I don't know if that was an original idea. I don't know if I got it from somewhere, but it's usually when people talk about, oh, but that's fiction, and I'm like, well, depending on the world and what's going on, sometimes you can't tell the truth without severe consequence, whether, what you're saying is right or wrong. If the world at large doesn't want to hear it, you're going to get squashed in one way, shape, or form. So sometimes the only way to tell the truth or get a point across is fiction. So that's why I think that's important to mention.
As V said in V for Vendetta, artists use lies to tell the truth while politicians use them to cover the truth up.
I like that one.
Evie says that in V for Vendetta. My bad. But yeah. Wow, Antonia, thank you so much for being on and letting me talk over you this whole time.
No problem. It was fun. It was fun. Of course. Well, thanks for having me. It was enjoyable. I stopped doing my radio show, so it was kind of fun to do something somewhat related.
Yeah, get back into the swing of things, broadcast a little bit. You know what I mean?
I think eventually when I with everything that's going on, once I feel like I've gotten my head together, I definitely want to do a podcast again.
Well, I can tell you are making the right decision. As somebody who this past year has become, a freelance digital artist and a podcaster and also voice actor and actor, and husband. Don't overfill your plate, people, before you take care of yourself, because you know what? And this just came to me now, so I'm glad we talked it out. This did more than my 45-minute therapy session before did.
Aw.
If you really care about your passions and these projects and you want to put everything you can into them, you obviously practice them and stuff, but be your best self, so that way you can put everything you can into it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Use your art to keep yourself calm and grounded and stuff, but before you start going, everyone buy my art, and then you're pressuring yourself to meet deadlines and stuff, just make sure that you are the best you can be. Ty, I don't think we actually talked about this. What are we reviewing next week?
Punk Rock Jesus.
All right, that's right. We are going to be reviewing Punk Rock Jesus. We may have a guest, we may not. We'll see how it goes. Folks, I've mentioned it before, and I'm going to mention it again. I'm really more concerned about the listeners of the podcast than getting ad money and stuff and making sure a million people hear it. I'm more concerned about staying true to us than, killing ourselves to get the thing out there and stuff. That being said, we may have guests on in the future. We may not, depending on just what's feasible on the production side of it. But yes, Punk Rock Jesus is an amazing graphic novel written and illustrated by Sean Gordon Murphy. And look it up yourself, because we'll go over the plot next time anyway.
Yeah, it's a personal favorite of ours, I think. And just in time for Easter.
Just in time for Easter, folks. That's right. Antonia, thanks again for being on the podcast. Do you want anyone to follow you on social media, or are you good?
I'm good for now. I'm kind of laying low with what I'm posting. Kind of slowed down until I have more of a focus of what I'm posting. So thank you, anyway, for asking.
And remember, folks, if you want to find us on YouTube, you can. If you want to find us on Twitter, we're at PolitiPopPod, Instagram at PolitiPopPodcast. You can email us at PolitiPopcast@gmail.com for those sweet WandaVision shirts, completely original design. And you can find our show notes and sources at PolitiPopPodcast.wordpress.com. Special thanks to all of our listeners, all of you out there, and to Antonia Chava for logo design, and for also being on this episode. For the PolitiPop Podcast, I have been Mike Booch.
I have been Ty.
And I'm Antonia Chava.
And remember, no matter what you're watching, what you're reading, what you're listening to, no matter what you're using to escape reality for a little bit of time so that way you can maintain your own sense of health and groundedness, never stop thinking, never stop learning, and always remember to read between the lines.
And scene.
All right.
I'm assuming I could stop recording at this point.